Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at horrormakesushappy.com. Today's guest is writer and director Dave Jackson, best known for Cat Sick Blues and Gotcha Gotcha. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. Is there anything that you want to plug before we get into the meat of the interview?
I wish there was, but no, I have nothing to plug, unfortunately.
For shame.
Yeah.
That's fine. So a little information both for you and the listeners before we get started. First off, trigger warnings. We're going to be talking about horror movies, which could involve anything: murder, rape, suicide, child abuse, plenty of F-bombs, because Chris and I do not censor ourselves.
Fuck.
So if you're not like that, hey, you've been warned. So if you're not prepared for that, please take care of yourself and come back when you're ready. In this interview, we'll be asking 3 sets of questions covering childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to try to dig into what it is about horror that you personally enjoy. The idea is that if we interview enough people, we might find some interesting common themes, maybe some interesting uncommon themes. And we're coming at these the topics from the 3 different directions of childhood and teenage years and adulthood, because sometimes doing it that way triggers memories that you had forgotten about. But that said, this is not meant as a therapy session, so if there's any questions that you don't want to answer, just say I'll pass on that one and we'll move on. So, starting with childhood, what were some of your earliest memories of scary things?
I'm going to pass on that one. No, I'm joking.
Thank you for joining us.
Pass on that one. Pass on that one. Pass.
That was. It's been nice talking to you. Have a good night.
Sorry, what was that? The question again?
What are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Of scary things, like outside of movies, or just in general?
Yeah, movies included. Movies, books, just any particular
relatives.
Oh man, there's so much. I do remember. Do you know the writer James Herbert?
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's like a British horror author from the 70s, and his most famous book is called The Rats, which you guys might have heard of before. But I remember being maybe about like 8 or 9, and I was quite a big reader, and we were staying at a friend's house, and I found it on the bookshelf and just read the whole thing in like one night, and it completely traumatized me, but I was also totally fascinated by it. So it's incredibly gory, demented book. And I reread it. Oh, sorry, let's drop something. I reread it as an adult, and it's just unbelievable trash. But it's just as a kid when I was reading, I'm like, this is crazy. I can't believe that anyone could write something like this. So yeah, that was one thing that really disturbed and amazed me. But yeah,
how old were you again?
I must have been maybe 8 or 9 or something like that.
Okay.
And I guess before that as well, like any kind of like horror scenes that would pop up in like anything, like I'd be pretty fascinated by. Like I was completely obsessed by the Gremlins movies, for example, when I was like 5 or 6, and just watched them on loop, basically. So yeah, I don't know what it was, but yeah, I just was very into anything that was like horror or a little bit dark or weird, even from a young age.
Before you mentioned the Gremlins, after you mentioned James Herbert being probably more popular in the UK and the territories, it occurred to me, I'm thinking to myself, crap, I wonder how much overlap there is between us being American and some of the movies that we've seen. Obviously, I think, the bigger movies, especially the blockbusters, you would have seen, but it occurred to me that there's probably some stuff that you'd be familiar with that we never even would have heard of.
I think I'm sure you'd be familiar with this stuff, but maybe it's just bigger in the UK and in Australia. For example, I watched as a kid, watched a lot of Hammer horror, which was on TV a lot. I don't know if you guys watch much Hammer horror or if it was big in the States, but Hammer was a very big deal for me as a kid as well.
Chris, you watched that, didn't you?
I actually never really watched a lot of the classics. I kind of caught on a little later in like the creature feature days with like cheesy 70s creature horror things like Bug, I think from 1970 something, which was about killer cockroaches that set fire to things. I'm a little ashamed of that. I know of the Hammer films. I know they are classics. They're like staple horror, Dracula, Creature from Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, Werewolf. But no, I've never actually sat through quite a lot of them.
Yeah, me either, actually. Like you say, I know of them, but I don't know that you'd see bits and pieces of them on TV and reruns and stuff like that, but I don't know that I've ever sat down and watched all the way through.
Definitely recommend all the Peter Cushing Frankenstein movies. Like the sequels just go in such crazy directions. It's completely nuts. Yeah. They're really great.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the ones that tangent off into like Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein.
I think that's so maybe you're thinking of the Universal horror films. So Hammer was the British studio that started in the 50s.
Okay.
And they remade, or not remade, but did their own versions of Frankenstein and Dracula. And it was like, I think that was the first time those films were in color, or those stories were in color, and they added like a lot of gore and kind of it was quite a kind of garish kind of color, and they're pretty great, those films. Yeah, sort of from the 50s to the 70s they were making stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Creature from the Black Lagoon, was that Universal or Hammer?
Yeah, that's a Universal one, yeah.
Okay.
That's great, that film.
Anything else? So it's kind of interesting. I'm sorry, I don't know how old you are, but you kind of jumped from, stuff that's older than me to stuff that's, Gremlins was the 80s.
Yeah. No, I'm 34. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess because like Australia, we were a bit behind the rest of the world back then as well. So a lot of the stuff I watched were probably older videos that I could rent for cheap at the video store.
That's fair.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't really think of any films that. I mean, horror was not very good in the 90s either, so I can't really think of many like 90s horrors that I like. Maybe like Candyman or something when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
but
there were some good ones in the 90s. Candyman being one of them.
Yeah.
We'll come to that. But yeah, I can understand and relate to that because as a child, I was born in the 70s, but I can remember sitting there being plopped down in front of a television and watching cartoon reruns from the 50s.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the same for me as well. Like I just remember watching the Flintstones, and I mean, how old is that?
One popped in my mind too. Yep.
Flintstones. What else?
Jetsons. Top
Jetsons.
Cat.
Yes, Top Cat. Hanna-Barbera.
What was the ones with the Triceratops that shot coal out of its horn and the gloops?
What is
Herculoids?
that?
Herculoids.
Herculoids. I don't know what that is. We didn't get that.
Cheesy 70s fantasy cartoon.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
My favorites were the Rocky and Bullwinkle, though.
They were great.
So at the time, you mentioned that you were kind of terrified but also excited by the rats. How did you feel about the Gremlins and the Hammer stuff? Was it...
I think, I was a little bit older when I watched Hammer, so I don't think they really scared me too much. I was just sort of interested in the makeup and all of that kind of stuff. Gremlins also, there were like it's kind of like a mixture of horror and comedy, so there was like a handful of scenes that freaked me out, but I think I was mostly into all the kind of gross stuff, like I loved all the disgusting puppets and all the goo and slime and stuff was, I think, what appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely did have some funny moments, particularly the bad Gremlins would do things and then they'd look at the camera and laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no shame in breaking the fourth wall with that movie. It was more of a fun film.
Especially the second one is just like, that remains one of my favorite films.
Oh yeah.
If you go back and watch it, it's like unbelievable that something that crazy was made in, I guess it's like 1990 or whenever it's from. It's completely insane, that second one. Yeah.
I don't. They're all like a blur to me. So I don't remember what parts went to which ones.
Second one was the one that happened in like a corporate high rise, and there were all kinds of different gremlins. Like you had, super intelligent gremlin, female gremlin. I think that was the one with the spider gremlin too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the second one's much more kind of like riffing on the original, and it's kind of I think that's why perhaps people didn't like it at the time, because it's not really a very normal sequel. It's just like a kind of cartoon version of the original.
I
But yeah,
mean,
it's really great.
I feel it makes it more true sequel that way, because that's kind of true sequel fashion. Like the formula for a sequel is take what was good about the first one, magnify it times 10, and don't take yourself seriously.
Mm. Yeah, definitely makes fun of a lot of the elements from the original. Yeah, it's a really great film.
So, of the ones that you've mentioned so far, it sounds like the only one that you were actually legitimately afraid of or scared by was the rats.
Yeah, that definitely scared me a lot. Yeah.
I can see how that would happen.
Were there any others that you remember from that time period that legitimately scared you?
I'm trying to think if there was anything else that genuinely terrified me. I think my parents didn't really let me see much in the way of like newer or like, modern kind of horror until I was a bit older. So I think it was more my teenage, maybe early teens. How what's the age range? What are we talking about for childhood here? Is it like
I'd say up until like 12, 13.
Okay, well actually when I was about I had one very kind of crazy horror watching night with a friend when I must have been 12, and I don't know why, but there was a lot of horror movies on TV that night, and we watched in a single night. We watched The Shining, which
Nice.
scared me more than any other film has ever scared me in my life.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
We watched that. We watched Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which is an amazing movie, probably maybe one of the best sequels ever made. And that completely terrified me as well. And we watched Child's Play 2, which is kind of the shit one out of those three, but I still loved it as well. So that was in one night watching all those three films, and we could not sleep after watching those. But I feel like that night kind of really shaped my kind of like solidified my love of horror, and just the feeling of being terrified watching those films, but especially The Shining. Like, oh my god, like The Shining still scares the crap out of me.
What scares you about
The Shining? I think it's the way Kubrick shoots it is so disturbing. Like the kind of the camera kind of going down the hallway, and like it's going around the corner, and you don't know what's going to be there, and it's just the anticipation that he builds.
Yeah,
and I think also that it kind of centers around a little kid as well, makes it really frightening. And I like that there's no like easy answers in that film. It's very like you don't really know. It never completely tells you what's real and what isn't, and what. Yeah, it's just it's a really unsettling kind of film the whole way through, start to finish. Yeah, great film.
What about Elm Street?
Elm Street. So I think in those first 3 Elm Street films, I mean, they go off the rails after that, but I think Freddy is a really just a absolutely disgusting and terrifying character. He just visually, he's so disturbing. And just how I think watching that third one, I mean, when I watch it now, it's kind of funny, some of the lines that he says, but he's just so like vicious and aggressive, and like it's a really it's quite frightening. I mean, if I watch that film now, it's not scary to me at all. The original is still quite frightening, but I think Freddy as a character is just really gets under my skin.
Yeah,
you're right.
Remind me again, which one was number 3?
It's Dream Warriors. When
that's what I thought. So okay,
Craven came back to produce it and kind of reset the series, and it's much like bigger and crazier than the original.
In true sequel fashion.
Yeah, and it's all set in a kind of like in a asylum, I guess it is, for disturbed kids.
Right.
Yeah, and it's very big. It's very 80s. But yeah, it's got the famous scene where Freddy like sort of comes out of a TV, then grabs a woman and smashes her head into the screen. Yeah.
Was it the TV or the bed?
His head comes out of the top of the TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite was the marionette scene. Gotta love that one.
Oh yeah, that's great. Oh, that's horrible. Yeah, using like tendons as like the strings, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's upsetting.
Yeah. Yeah, small bit of background. Chris is more the horror expert on this one. I'm more of the psychological background.
Okay.
So I usually rely on him to remind me of the things that I've forgotten in terms of the movies. The way I am, I never really. There are very few movies that I will watch more than once. And a lot of movies I just won't even watch at all because I don't know. I was always the type of person that I hated getting up from a movie and feeling like I just wasted 2 hours of my life that I could have been doing something better on. So I like to find out from my friends and other sources whether or not something was a good movie before I sit down and watch it. And there's just a lot of them that I've wound up not watching. But through Chris and a lot of other friends, I have seen plenty of movies. And even if I haven't seen the movie myself, usually we have enough of a conversation about something that I know what happened anyway. So that's why I was checking with you guys on which one was number 3. Although that one I did see. It's just been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah, I think we've all seen number 3 at some point, like at least the first 3.
So you commented on what the things were that kind of scared you or creeped you out about The Shining and Elm Street and a little bit about the rats. What were the things that you enjoyed about them?
I think it's maybe, I would imagine it's probably similar. Like I hate roller coasters, but people love them because of the thrill they kind of feel from it, of being scared. So I think that's like initially why I enjoyed horror so much, because it's like, it's terrifying, but it's also a safe kind of space as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, there's something what's the word, like cathartic about seeing something very violent and scary. I mean, especially when the world is like, you know, it's scary in a different way, right? So this is kind of like a more of kind of fun, kind of fantasy, ridiculous version of fear that we can sort of just enjoy in our living room, and then return to the reality of the true terror of life, of paying bills and economic collapse and stuff like that. So,
and we're still in childhood, but yes, I totally agree with you there.
It's like just escapism, really.
Yeah.
And I think horror as well is just like, in some ways, kind of like the most pure cinema, because it's out there to get like a physical reaction from you, and I really enjoy that about it.
Yeah, he's not very popular anymore these days, but Bill Cosby used to have some skits relating to
why is he
horror.
not popular anymore?
Something
Haven't you
about
heard?
A drink with something in it or something. I
don't know. But he had a skit about Frankenstein, and he talks about how scary movies to kids were the best thing, or not scary movies, but to be able to scare another kid was awesome, because that's when you see the true self. Like, there is no pretending you're cool when you're scared.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
So you mentioned when you were 12 years old, you had this friend that you watched these movies with, but other than that, you didn't have a lot of exposure as a child. So I'm guessing there was no other friend or neighbor or family member who shared these things with you as a child. That didn't come until later.
Basically, did you have a horror crew when you were a child?
Not when I was a child. When I was a teenager, I think I did. But yeah, not so much as a little kid. But I kind of, not so much horror, but I have a much older brother. So my brother's 14 years older than me. So he was kind of like my gateway into watching things I probably shouldn't have been watching. And not necessarily just horror, but like, I'd go stay at his house when I was like 7 or whatever, and read all his Robert Crumb comics, and he'd put on a movie that I probably shouldn't be watching, like like a Boys in the Hood or something like that. So he was kind of the one that more introduced me to things, but not specifically horror, but more just adult stuff. Yeah.
Always good to have that older sibling.
Yeah, but I mean, and some of the questions that we're going to ask may not apply to you, where we just have them because you never know what's going to apply and what isn't. In some of these things you had mentioned, like for example, Gremlins, you knew that there was some humor there. The first thing you mentioned, the rats, did you know that that was supposed to be entertaining, or that you're supposed to be entertained by the fear, or was it just straight like I couldn't believe that this was written?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I can't really remember what. I just remember being incredibly shocked that it was. I'd read a lot, but I'd never read anything so graphic before, and I just didn't think that books were allowed to do that, which sounds stupid, but I just didn't think that was a thing that existed. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, how can you be writing this? Like, it's crazy. So yeah, I guess after that I was like, oh, okay, so they're just like movies as well. They can do all these things as well. But it was it was more the graphicness of it that really horrified me.
and potentially, I mean, in a way, books can be even more graphic because you're using your imagination.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, when I was a teenager, I read American Psycho, and I think that disturbed me much more than any movie has ever disturbed me.
I've heard the book is really good.
The book is pretty amazing. It's incredibly funny, which I think the movie kind of got. Like, the movie got the aesthetics really well, but it kind of misses the true like insanity of the book. The book is so out of control and so insanely violent and shocking.
It's a lot more, I guess, of an inside view into Patrick Bateman's mind, like a lot more.
Yeah, and you kind of it plays with reality in a way that's very funny and also disturbing.
Do you mean by unreliable narrator or something else?
Yeah, kind of that. You don't. I mean, the movie's sort of the same as well. Like it never really tells you directly what's fantasy and what's not. And I think the book does it quite a lot better in some ways, where you kind of where he also doesn't know what reality is as well and questions it at times. So yeah, it's really fantastic. But yeah, so disgusting, like such a disgusting book. It was actually in Australia. It was the only book that it wasn't banned, but if you went to a bookshop to buy it, it was wrapped up in sealed plastic.
Really?
And it had an R rating. So our R is kind of like your X, I think. So it had like an R rating, so you couldn't buy it if you were under 18. But they let me buy it, so it was fine.
Was the cover graphic? Was there a reason why they had to wrap it up?
No, it was just a normal cover. Yeah, no, you could still see the cover. It was just sealed up in plastic, so kids couldn't pick it up and
I see. Yeah,
flick through it. Yeah.
So did you participate in Halloween as a kid? Did you dress up?
No, we in Australia.
That was my next question. Did you have Halloween?
It's not really a thing at all. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe these days it's perhaps becoming a bit more of a thing, but the most we would have ever done was just have like maybe when I was a teenager, you might have a Halloween dress up party, but probably not either. So not really a thing. These days, though, in Japan, I participate in it. Weirdly enough, it's a big thing here.
We'll come to that. All right. So jumping down a few here, you said that you didn't have any friends or family other than the adult, or not the adult, but the older brother. Not speaking of movies or fiction at this point, actually talking about reality, was there anything that actually terrified you as a child in reality?
Yeah, I guess so. I was apparently when I was, I don't really remember this, but apparently when I was really young, like maybe 3 or 4, I was terrified of gorillas. And I don't really know why, and I'm not now. But
I mean, that's a rational fear. A gorilla could kind of.
I mean, yeah, they're very frightening. But I used to always have dreams that there were gorillas in our backyard, and I think my vague memory, I think it came from overhearing my parents talking about the movie Gorillas in the Mist, and like the title of that alone was enough for my imagination to like run wild and picture all these like terrifying gorillas in the mist.
It's funny you say that, because when you said that was the first thing that came to mind, was the phrase "gorillas in the mist."
So weird. And I think
I thought about
does that movie, or it's based on a real story, I think, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Maybe?
Diane Fossey.
She got killed by poachers, is that right?
I believe
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think when I was overhearing my parents talking about it, I think they were talking about her getting killed, but I think I just assumed that the gorillas had killed her. So like I was picturing like gorillas horribly murdering this Sigourney Weaver. So
well, it sounds like you got the main gist of the story then. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. So that was like a weird fear. And I had a fear of that. And I mean, again, no, I think most of my fears came from pop culture, though. I was going to say I had a fear of Arnold Schwarzenegger as well. But, I mean, that's from Terminator. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And again, terrified of sharks, but because of Jaws. So most of my fears came from watching films.
Same here. Okay. I actually had an irrational fear for a little while as a child that there would somehow be a shark in the tub.
I had the same thing. Yeah, I
don't know. It just gets in your head after seeing that movie and the way that it delivered the fear and tension. You're just like, and no water is safe now.
Yeah. Actually, I remember that distinctly. Like, I think that's why I switched to having showers.
Same.
But I got completely like after seeing Jaws, it's still one of my favorite movies, but I got completely obsessed with sharks after it as well, and just bought all of these shark books and would just like read shark stories all night and freak myself out.
Well, you have to study them to prepare to be safe from them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So at this point, at least, we wouldn't say that childhood really horror made you happy. There was maybe some uncomfortableness there, other than the one, for example, Gremlins, where you knew that was meant to be humor.
Yeah, I definitely tried to seek out anything that was a bit weird and graphic. Yeah, I think it very much interested me.
What other weird or graphic stuff? Like, what are some examples?
I mean, it's more stuff from other films that are not necessarily horror. So, like, for example, like The Dark Crystal.
Yes.
The elements of that just terrified me and but also really fascinated me. Or actually, a good example would be like Temple of Doom, the Indiana Jones film. There's a scene where a guy gets his heart pulled out.
Yep.
And I remember every time I watched that movie, my mum would fast forward that scene so I couldn't see it. But I would see it in fast motion. I'd just be like, oh my God, what the hell's happening in this scene? And I think my imagination kind of like made it much worse than it actually is. But yeah, all the kind of graphic stuff. That film is fairly graphic and messed up. So like all the, the eating monkey brains and the snakes and like all of that stuff was like, whoa, oh my God, this is amazing, but also frightening. So yeah, I latched on to like, even if I didn't watch a lot of horror as a young kid, any other movies that had kind of horror-ish scenes, I would sort of latch onto those scenes that would sort of stick in my mind.
Yeah, I remember Temple of Doom. When I saw that, I wasn't scared by it, but I was grossed out by it.
Yeah, it's quite a disgusting movie, really. Yeah. It's my favorite of the three.
He's like standing there holding it and the thing's still beating in his hand.
Yeah.
Nam Shibai.
Kalima. Yeah, and then the part about the eating the monkey brain, I couldn't do that one.
Yeah, it's very gross.
Well, and the fact that, the way they did it, having a live monkey, under the table, that, at least that's what I remember. Wasn't it a live monkey? I thought it was.
I think they brought out a monkey head on a tray and it had the skull exposed.
Maybe. I thought they did a cut where it was live in one cut and then dead in the other.
You may be thinking of Faces of Death, where they supposedly had a monkey with its head just stuck through the bottom of a table and they ate its brains.
That's possible too. So So, moving on to teenage years, you mentioned the American Psycho book. What other horror-related stuff really impacted you as a teen?
Yeah, that I think from maybe like 14 onwards, I got very, very obsessed with trying to find like the most disturbing kind of horror that I could find. So what did I get into back then? I think I really got into Italian horror back then.
Cool.
So I watched a lot of Lucio Fulci films, and would have my who did I get to? Yeah, weirdly enough, my brother's friend. I would get him to go into the DVD shop, and I'd give him the money, and he'd come out with like a Lucio Fulci film. Yeah,
Other kids
so
are getting older children or other older people to get them liquor or smoke. So you're like, hey, can you get me some?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, a lot of his films, and it's not so much films that scare me, but more films that grossed me out is sort of what I was looking for, I think. And I got massively into like trauma films at that time as well, which again are not scary films, but just really gross films. So I think I started just trying to find more like violent, horrible kind of stuff. Yeah, rather than actually scary kind of things. But yeah, that's when it sort of really kind of kicked in for me.
Remind me, this is on the tip of my tongue, but trauma was like nuclear waste or something like that.
Yeah,
Toxic Adventure.
Yeah, Toxic Avenger is like
you.
the most famous one. Yeah,
And they've also got other classics like Romeo and Juliet.
Terra Firma was the one that I was really obsessed with, and kind of part of the reason I think I started making my own films, because it's a film about making films, and it's also incredibly gross and disgusting. So yeah, my friends and I in high school used to watch that quite a lot.
What did you like about that one?
Just because I feel like if I watched it now, I probably wouldn't enjoy it quite as much, but I really like that it pushes the boundaries of taste. Actually, it doesn't even push it. It just like shits all over the like it's completely just does not give a shit, that film. And it's very like pro kind of independent spirit, independent filmmaking, like fuck Hollywood, all that kind of stuff, which really appealed to me at the time. It still does now. But yeah, more so that it's just like it's like they sat down and they're like, how can we make the most disgusting, offensive scene we possibly can? And then they just kept on the writing process, just kept pushing it further and further and further.
Okay, so American Psycho, Italian horror, trauma, terra firma. Anything else?
I mean, just lots and lots and lots of horror at that point. Like just anything I could find. I do remember I'm trying to think of something that genuinely unsettled me at that time. I do remember when I was going through Italian horror, seeing, starting to see stuff like, for example, Cannibal Holocaust. Probably, and still to this day, upset me more than any other film I'd seen.
There's some fairly upsetting stuff in there. The turtle.
Yeah, it's really not. It's not right,
animal.
that film.
Yeah. Let's just say you could get away with a lot in the 70s.
Yeah, I think I'm very torn with my feelings on that film, because it's a genuinely despicable movie, but it's also incredibly effective in the way that it's made. So it famously has real animal deaths in it, which is horrible, and it kind of has that at the beginning of the film, because it's meant to be like a kind of fake documentary that you're watching. So then when it shifts from these horrible real animal deaths to deaths of humans, it's kind of blurred to like reality, and what's fake and what's real is kind of blurred together. And it just makes it so disturbing. So it's kind of brilliantly made, but it's an incredibly it's ethically completely fucked, that film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I sort of struggle. I kind of I respect its filmmaking, but I don't respect the what they did to make it.
Like a necessary evil.
Yeah, I guess so.
Did you wait? Clarification. Did you say necessary or unnecessary?
Necessary.
Okay.
The world would probably be a better place without it.
Yeah.
Well, probably wouldn't really make any difference in the long run. I mean, when you think about how screwed up human beings are and what we do without movies,
Yeah, that's true.
long before movies existed.
Mm.
What were you enjoying about finding these things that not just pushed boundaries, but disturbed you? And
yeah, I think I just wanted to see things that kind of shocked me. So I think I've moved from seeing horror as something that would scare me, then to stuff that I'd just be like, oh my god, that's horrible. I can't believe they did that in a movie. So I think that's sort of what I was trying to find. Yeah. And that continued for a long time. I'm not really like that anymore, but yeah, all through my teenage years, that's what I was like.
what do you think you enjoyed about being shocked?
I think I do feel like most people, even though they might not admit it, I think most people like to see things that they feel that they probably shouldn't be seeing, and things that kind of shake them up a little bit, because it's something that's like, I don't know. I think it's just it's natural. It's like part of our curiosity as humans, I think. But I think it's enjoyable to watch in a horror film or like some disgusting, gory kind of film, because you're seeing it and you're like, well, it's not real.
Right.
Well, except for Cannibal Holocaust.
Right.
But you're seeing something that's like still kind of, you still have that safety net there as well. Whereas I think some people go the other way and get like obsessed with like real life kind of, I guess you would still call it gore, but like, I remember at that time, rotten.com, which was this very fucking horrible website with all real death sort of stuff. I remember I had like these friends who would like, oh, did you check out this thing on rotten.com? I'm like, no, I don't want to see that because it's really disgusting. and they're like, oh, and this is actually something that's haunted me all my life, even up until recently, where I'll have people going like, oh, did you see insert some real death things? So like, oh, did you see this horrible beheading video? And I'm like, no, I don't want to. It sounds disgusting. I don't want to see real death. And they're like, oh, but you love
it's great.
horror.
Check it out.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, but you're a horror fan. I'm like, no, but horror is not real.
Right? Like this is real. Someone actually lost their head. I don't.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So I think some people have that kind of curiosity, and then I think horror is like, it's a similar kind of thing, but it's also, it's still safe. Like it's not, no one's getting hurt. Yeah, when you watch that. But yeah, I always just found it so weird that people would be like, oh, you must like this because you like, you like Lucio Fulci films. Like a very weird jump for me.
No, you're right. There's definitely two categories there. There are some people that don't see a difference, and some people who do.
My experience with Rotten was I used images from it on my SoundClick account. This is dating myself here. It was back in the early aughts, and I was producing aggressive music similar to like some breakcore artists like Venetian Snares or Dormouse, and the website allowed you to put an image for each track. So because I was making violent, aggressive music, each track had just random images from Rotten.com. They removed my images after a while. I think they changed their policy, I think, is what happened.
I wonder if you had something to do with that.
Maybe. I like to think so.
So it's interesting. So you said that you kind of like to be shaken up, but you also basically said that you also want to know that it is fiction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't want to be forever haunted by something like something real. Yeah.
Yeah. So here in your teenage years, did you start having a crew of friends or even relatives that also enjoyed this kind of stuff, or no?
Yeah, like I started making films at that point as well. So I kind of had my filmmaking crew, and we would sort of watch stuff together. But no one that I was friends with in high school really had the same level of obsession with films, and especially horror films that I did. But yeah, I did have like a handful of friends that I would just bring over and force them to watch all these ridiculous horror movies.
I can relate.
Yeah. But I don't think it wasn't, I think it wasn't until I became an adult that I found kind of, I mean, that's sort of the story of high school, right? You find your true friends after high school, I think, or your true people. So yeah, I think it was more, I was forcing things on other people in high school rather than it being like and yeah, like them actually enjoying it and on the same level as me.
Okay. How old were you when you started making films?
15, 14 or 15.
And were they horror films or like right out the gate?
Sort of. Most of the stuff I made was, I've never made like a straight horror film. They were mostly kind of comedy stuff, but they were gross comedy, like disgusting comedy with a lot of violence in them. Yeah, the first film I made was kind of like a slasher parody. It's so terrible to think of now, but it was it's about a guy who goes around murdering people who are fans of the movie Scream because he's really annoyed about how it's ruined horror movies. says a lot about me at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I most of the stuff I made was sort of was definitely comedy, but just very gross comedy, and that's continued throughout my life.
So, didn't really have a crew in those regards. Again, wouldn't have celebrated Halloween because that wasn't a thing there.
That's so crazy.
You just can't even imagine it, can you?
It's a foreign concept to me. How do you not have Halloween?
It is weird that we haven't latched onto that one. Like, there's nothing else from American culture I'd like to take except Halloween. That's like the one thing I wouldn't mind if we copied.
Like, I understand giving a pass on Easter or Thanksgiving. Like, I'm good on that. That's Halloween's the fun one.
That would be hilarious if we had Thanksgiving. It would just make absolutely no sense. I kind of like that idea. Like, let's have Thanksgiving in Australia.
And you have to have it to celebrate, like how for Independence Day, well, actually, you wouldn't have an Independence Day either because you're still part of the Commonwealth. So I was thinking if you're doing Thanksgiving, it should be on the same day as we do it in America, just for the extra surrealness of it.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd enjoy that a lot.
Let's be honest, it's just an excuse to eat food.
Well, yeah. So did you have any experience, like you mentioned, in your childhood years, there were a couple things that really terrified you, the gorillas, Arnie from Terminator, Jaws. What about teenage years? Was there anything that legitimately scared you as a teen, like in reality?
Yeah, no, nothing really comes to mind in particular.
Any reoccurring nightmares or reoccurring dreams?
I have like it's kind of a weird thing. It's not really a fear, but I had when I was a teenager, I started having these really weird recurring night terrors, which was I still sometimes get them now, but it's more like a once a year kind of thing. But it's when I would wake up, but I'd still be half asleep, and I'd hallucinate spiders crawling all over my bed, and it would scare the absolute shit out of me. And then I'd have to sort of slowly wake up. But the weird thing about it is, like, I'm not particularly scared of spiders. Like, they're not something that freak me out that much. But in that moment, it would be terrifying.
Like the sudden moment of awakening with spiders surrounding you. That's a little jarring.
Yeah, definitely. Just having them crawling all over you. Yeah.
It sounds like sleep paralysis. Like you're partially waking up and you're probably getting the pins and needles.
Yeah, I think it's maybe. Yeah, I think it's maybe something like kind of similar to that. Yeah, and I've always, and I still get this now. It's really embarrassing. Like, even from being a kid, I have this thing where like I'll wake up technically, but I'll still be like in a dream state, and people have had like these absolutely bizarre conversations with me where I'm rambling about things that don't make any sense, and then I have the experience of kind of waking up a second time and realizing what I'm saying,
like mid conversation.
Yeah, so whenever people came and stayed at my house, I'd always be like, "Oh my god, please don't let me have that happen." This is so embarrassing, but yeah, so I've had that, and then the spider thing, but yeah, not really anything that day to day used to like upset me. I was probably more worried about like making friends and like you know getting through high school. That was probably my true fear. Just going to school.
Those are the real sources of trauma or any kind of fear when you're a teenager. Just like,
yeah,
what my friends think of me.
Yeah, like, oh, how bad will my acne be tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what about adulthood? What were some of the scary stories or books or movies that you've come across as an adult now that have impacted you?
I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of moved further away from wanting to be shocked, but rather just wanting to be like maybe just maybe been replaced with like I want to have like an emotional response to something or see something that connects to me in some kind of way. So I think I've sort of reverted to that. In terms of stuff that's like scared me as an adult, I'm trying to think of a film of recent years as genuinely unsettled me. There's not really. Oh, actually, do you know? No, there is one film. Have you heard of a film, or have you seen Martyrs before? The French film.
Yes, the original
That film, yeah, the original Martyrs, absolutely broke my brain in a way that I don't think a film has done since. It just is. It's kind of everything. It's like incredibly disturbing, but then it's also kind of beautifully made and kind of it's like almost like cosmic horror. Like it's like it kind of it's that So I think things that kind of like break my brain is what I kind of seek now in my horror films. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that film really unsettled me.
What about it unsettled you?
I think it's very unpredictable. Like it sort of starts as like a kind of typical, very like grimy, horrible sort of French nihilistic kind of horror film. But then as it goes on, it starts to like go into like an area that I just did not expect it to. And it kind of connects to, it's very hard to explain without ruining it either, but it kind of, I think it's the way it just sort of goes off in this other direction that I wasn't expecting that really, I don't know. It was just very
If you could
unexpected.
describe the direction.
Well, I think I would say like, cosmic horror. It starts as this very small insular sort of story and then just turns into this kind of disturbing like conspiracy as it goes on.
Like Lovecraftian or
not really Lovecraftian, more like a cult, I guess you could say.
Yeah, cult, but also kind of like one of those things where it's like it doesn't give you the full answers of where it ends up either. So it's it's a very, very unsettling film. Highly recommend it. Yeah, it really disturbed me.
And when you said the name of it, were you saying martyrs? Like
martyrs. Yeah,
the people that die for a cause.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, that's a part of it.
All right. So, other than martyrs, anything else that really stood out to you in your adult life as being influential, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff. It's hard to think of a specific thing, but finally got around to watching Twin Peaks: The Return, the sort of third series of Twin Peaks, and I'm still kind of feeling the effects of the last episode of that. Where it's not necessarily horror, but it was just incredibly incredibly disturbing. I think things that like don't give clear answers like, and are kind of like nightmarish. I think that's sort of the stuff that disturbs me now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an incredible series. That new series of Twin Peaks, where it's mostly a comedy, and then when it turns into like slips more into like horror, or, kind of universe hopping kind of weird stuff. It's genuinely disturbing. Yeah, that's definitely one as well.
It's interesting you say that because, and I was going to point this out just on the last thing we talked about, the martyrs, and this is now 3 times that you've used, unanswered questions. So let's ask about that a little bit. What do you like about unanswered questions, other than the fact that it's just uncomfortable?
I think when things are unknown or unclear, it's just more. I think it's more interesting as a narrative, but it's also it kind of gives the audience the opportunity to kind of fill in that space with their own imagination. And I think our own imagination is probably more scary than anything like a filmmaker could come up with, because we're kind of putting our own kind of fears into it as well. So I think the uncertainty and not, I mean, even like now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and the most scary thing about it is the uncertainty, right? So like
the
our
unknown.
imagination of what's going to happen next is more disturbing than actually getting the virus, I think. So I think uncertainty, unknown, I think that they're the true kind of like fears that I think everyone has, whether or not they're even conscious of it. So I think that's perhaps what it is.
Let me try asking this a different way. What do you get out of uncertainty?
Like as a viewer?
Yeah, like what do you get out of it?
I think it's just something that like, makes you consider something more, makes you think about it more. It's enjoyable to like engage with a movie or a TV show or a book where you're like continuing to like think about it after it's finished. I think if something is like too cleanly wrapped up, then you kind of just move on from it. And that's like one. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was gonna say, like, I agree. Like, it's less finite or less plain, really. If something is left open ended, it has more of an intrigue because you don't know. There's no answer, no defined answer. It's open ended, so you can kind of, it's a little frustrating at times, especially when things are left very open ended. Like, a lot of films
can be
give
too
you that.
much, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like the new Joker film, I wasn't a fan of the whole, it may have just been a dream thing at the end. Oh, God, I hate when they do that. But certain open-ended, ambiguous endings are good.
Yeah, it's very like, it really does depend on the writing. It has to be done well for it to actually work, rather than just like cutting you off and not finishing something. But I think like, and I think some things are enjoyable as like a piece of more kind of like easily digestible kind of entertainment if they're wrapped up as well. So it kind of depends what you're in the mood for. But like if I think about like TV shows, like Breaking Bad, for example, I liked Breaking Bad. I don't think it's the masterpiece everyone makes it out to be, but I think the end of that show, I've never seen a show that has so ridiculously, almost to the point of it being comical, how stupidly neatly it's wrapped up, where it's like everything is tied up that you wanted to see tied up, everything you expected to see happens, and we're done, it's tied up. So when that show is over, I never thought about it again, never felt like I needed to go back to it. Then if you think of something like The Sopranos, which has this very controversial ending that's very open and very like uncertain, full of interpretation, that has like, I still think about that finale, and I still think about that show and the meaning behind it, and that ending has really kind of haunted me throughout the years. And I think it's just like, it's a different kind of experience, and it's a much more like valuable experience, I think, as like a viewer, to like engage with something that's a bit less like cut and dry. So it's like, there's different types of enjoyment you get out of different sort of things, but I just, for something really great, I like to have be left with that kind of feeling.
So I'm going to use a slightly different word than what you used, lingering. And to borrow a word from your last sentence, valuable. What do you find valuable about lingering?
About like the feelings of something lingering. I think it's just makes you think about, you know, your own life. It makes you think about like why, like, and even like appreciating it as a story and as a piece of art, like thinking why certain choices were made and the story as a whole and like meanings behind it. I think it's nice to be left with something and like keep thinking about it and keep like it's something that like changes that you can kind of go back to and like watch again. So I think like having repeat kind of value is really enjoyable as well. Not all the time. Like sometimes I just want to watch something trashy and easy. Like the other night I watched, have you heard of Stalker's Prey?
No.
It's like a Lifetime movie.
Oh boy.
And it's about a
That's
stalker.
all you had to say.
It's about a shark obsessed stalker who rescues a girl from a shark, and it's just like sometimes I'm just in the mood for a piece of shit, especially now when, you know, I don't want to think about anything, sort of switch my brain off. Like that's what I'm in the mood for. But yeah, other times, yeah, like my partner and I have a word for it where we're like, what do we want to watch tonight? Are you in the mood for like something heavy or something light? It's just like they're the choices. Right. Like you want to watch something that we're going to be thinking about for the rest of the week, and like, you know, unpacking in our minds, or do you want to watch something that's just going to allow us to perhaps lose a few brain cells?
Yeah.
Non-horror question for a second, just because what you're saying is making me think of this. So in general, outside of horror, do you tend to enjoy puzzles?
No. Do you mean like literal puzzles?
Like a Rubik's Cube?
No, I hate them. I legitimately hate them. I think maybe from what you were saying, because you're like you said before, if you watch a shitty movie, you're like, oh, I just wasted time. For me, no matter how shit the film is, I still get something out of it because like I kind of unpack like why it was shit. So then maybe I can bring that into my own. So it's, for me, it's like always like part of my education if I'm watching a movie. But when I'm doing a puzzle, I don't know. It's just like, it's also kind of why I don't play video games either. Because
there's
I'm like,
nothing to be learned. You either complete it or you don't.
And I know that's kind of harsh to say that as well, because you do. I'm sure it is like improving your brain by doing it, but I just don't have the patience for it. I'm not really, because like the end goal is like just finishing a puzzle. Like, what else am I getting out of that? So for me,
you can
I
tell
kind of
people that you finished it.
Yeah.
Okay, it just occurred to me that because something that you were saying made me realize, well, maybe that's something that it might not be horror related, but if I found out that you liked puzzles, then that could explain part of the reason why you like having things to think about, or to pore over, to puzzle over, continue thinking about. So you kind of mentioned that at least in your adult life, then you started having some friends that had or shared your enjoyment of horror and those kinds of things.
I must have been in my early 20s. I met a guy who I'm still very close to now. He does like all the artwork for yeah, like any sort of film stuff I've done. He did the title sequence in Cat Sick Blues as well. But he's an artist, and when we met, we kind of hit it off straight away by realizing we had like the same kind of interests. And yeah, I think the thing I enjoyed about him is that like we were both very into like digging out like the most obscure kind of weird films we could find. And I was like very into like Japanese stuff at the time, and he was very into like Hong Kong stuff. So we had this kind of trading process of like, I'd be like, oh, have you heard of this like fucking crazy Japanese film? Here, you can borrow my DVD. And he'd be like, oh, have you heard about this fucking mental Hong Kong film. It's crazy, like blah blah blah. And so we do like a kind of swap sort of thing and kind of educate each other and fill in the gaps of our weird movie knowledge, and then sort of like discover things together as well. So I think it was like part of the joy of like that is like more the hunt for the films, like trying to go into all these like dodgy, Chinese bootleg kind of DVD places to try and find this one particular film. So that was really fun.
You didn't mention any of these Japanese, or did you say Korean?
Hong Kong.
Sorry.
Ones, yeah.
You didn't mention any of these when I asked if there was anything that impacted you as an adult, so I'm guessing there was nothing that really... Were they all...
No, I mean, the problem is, like, I watch a lot of movies, so if you ask me something like that, I'm kind of digging through, like, thousands of films in my mind.
Yeah, it's like answering the question, what's your favorite movie? Like,
it's kind of similar to that, but, like, Japanese stuff, I mean, when I was still a teenager, I got really into Takeshi Miike movies. And also, like, if we're thinking just horror, a lot of this stuff doesn't really fall so neatly into a single category either. But I guess, like, yeah, Miike's stuff like Ichi the Killer and Audition really kind of, made a huge impact on me, but more as like filmmaking rather than kind of shocking me, if that makes sense. Like, I was just really impressed with the skill that went into it. So that kind of stuff I was really into.
Excuse me. So, other than this artist friend of yours, did you have any other people that you shared horror with?
For I think for horror it was mostly just that one friend. I had a lot of friends that were like very much like into like cinema in general, so we'd share a lot of just films in general that we enjoyed. But in terms of like even more so like horror and general demented weird kind of films, that was what my friend was. That's the sort of stuff that we engaged in.
Okay. You mentioned that now as an adult you are participating in Halloween a bit in Japan. How's that going?
It's very different here to how I imagine it would be in America. It's Japan basically takes American traditions and then does some very odd things with them. Yeah. Do you know have you heard about Christmas in Japan?
Yes,
what they do here?
Yes. when you were starting to talk about that I was even going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't go to KFC on Christmas in Japan because they're obsessed with KFC. They think that all Americans go out to KFC for Christmas, and they've that's what they do here. So you can't if you want fried chicken on Christmas in Japan, you will not be getting it because it'll be sold out everywhere. Halloween's kind of a similar sort of thing where they've kind of here it's more about it doesn't even happen on Halloween. So for basically the closest Saturday to Halloween, and also on Halloween night, but mostly the Saturday, everyone just goes out dressed in a costume.
I mean, that's kind of like how it is here if you're an adult. It's whatever the nearest Saturday is.
Yeah, so everyone sort of goes out to this sort of public... so I live in Osaka, but there's a area called like Triangle Park. It's not really a park. It's basically just like a concrete
It's not
area.
a triangle either.
Yeah, but it's sort of like in the hub of where like the kind of grimy big city sort of part is. So everyone just goes there in their costume and then just checks out each other's costumes and takes photos with each other. And then a lot of people walk down to the river, and then in their costumes, people jump into the river. and that's pretty much what Halloween is here. But it's so much fun, like just seeing the creativity of the costumes. But
have you ever seen any Teds out at Halloween?
I was like
from Cat's
Ted. When you said Ted, I like instantly imagined that Seth MacFarlane movie.
That's actually what I thought of too.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, that's Ted. No.
There's never seen any Teds out. No.
Shame. They're all over here in the States, apparently.
It's not actually released in Japan, so
what?
I don't think anyone.
So you're not big in Japan?
It. No, sadly not.
Womp womp.
Not yet.
Only
anyway.
Italy.
Or have you been dressing up?
Yes, but the problem with the costumes that I've dressed up in, they're very like specific to Osaka. So I like dressing up as Osaka landmarks, basically.
That's cool.
Yeah,
okay.
so I
that's very relatable out there.
Yeah, if you look up Tower of the Sun, that's what I dressed up as 2 years ago. But it's kind of hard to imagine what it is. So yeah, any kind of I like stuff that's very specific to Japan or to Osaka to dress up as. I like the idea of costumes of things that you wouldn't dress up as. So
this looks like it was a very cumbersome costume. Oh my god! So were your arms in the large horns, and your face went out the moon face looking thing, or
my face was sort of like kind of cut out, and then I had a sort of big like hat thing on with like the golden face up the top, and then on my stomach was the other face.
Yeah.
Then the year after I dressed up.
Sorry, it's just really strange that I saw this somewhere like just a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's weird.
I don't even know why or where or how, but
it's by a really cool Japanese artist called Taro Okamoto. It was made for the World Expo they did in 1970. So, like I'm really obsessed with like 70s era Japan. So yeah, I took a real liking to that tower. I've actually got a tattoo of it as well.
Nice.
So yeah, that was the first big year of Halloween. That was my costume.
Going back to some of the questions, have you had any scary dreams as an adult?
I mean, they're not so exciting, to be honest. Most of my dreams will be very much based in boring reality. So it'll be like sort of work nightmares. But whenever it's election year, I just have not like as in American election, I have nonstop political nightmare dreams.
Oh god.
So my most recent nightmare, back when it looked like Bernie might have actually had a chance at being the nominee, I had a nightmare that there was a sex scandal that was fabricated by the Republicans, and that was going to destroy his chances, and it was like horrifying in the dream. So that's that was my last kind of, that's what my nightmares are like these days. And I remember before Trump got elected, I had a dream where I like met him, and he was like kind of outside of like the political sphere, kind of normal. And I had like this big argument with him, like, why are you doing this, man? Like, what is your problem? It's like kind of just a stress dream about politics. Yeah.
Oh god, for your dream to have been reality and for your conversation to have actually taken effect, that would have been good.
Yeah, like just telling Trump, like, why do you want to build that wall, man? Why do you want to do that?
You should just stop. Okay. There you go. Done.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So looking back over your entire life now, and I'm not asking about a favorite movie, although you can answer that if you like as well, but what movie have you watched more times than any other?
I'm going to like not include the Star Wars movies. I'm just going to skip past those.
Okay.
Probably them. But I think as a kid all the way to an adult, the one film that I've watched like over and over and over and over and over again is The Dark Crystal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely obsessed with that film.
Excellent choice. Have you seen the new series? I think it was, and it's supposed to be a prequel?
Oh my god, it was so good.
I need to watch that.
Oh my god, I could not believe how good it was.
Yeah.
It was it's the perfect like tie-in kind of show. It's amazing. It's actually, I don't want to overhype it. Well, I know I'm going to overhype it. I would say it's actually better than the original movie.
Okay, yeah.
Like
that's what it looked like to me. Like, because if they continue following suit with the same theme, the same tone, the same look, which it looks like it does, and it's just more elaborate and a little better done because we have better technology nowadays.
It's phenomenal, yeah. But at the same time, I've talked to people who love the original movie who said like, "Oh, that show was so shit, it like ruined my childhood." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Did we watch the same show?" Yeah, it's yeah, but no, that movie, yeah, when I was a kid, I almost like every second weekend, I think I rented it and just watched it over and over and over and over and over again. And yeah, I still love it just as much now.
Oh yeah.
I definitely enjoyed that as well. It was one of my favorites when I was a kid.
It's just such a dark film, like so. Yeah, it's like there's not really any other kids films from that time that match the kind of weight of that film, I think.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Secret of Nim?
No, I've always wanted to see that, but I've never seen it. Yeah, I heard that's really quite. Is that quite full on as well? Quite
Yes.
harsh?
It is. Yeah, that's the
For a
first thing
kid,
that popped
yeah.
into my head as well, Steve. That's funny.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same theme as Dark Crystal because it's not really a fantasy and epic adventure, but it is definitely a possibly borderline kids film, but dark. You know, it's got some realism to it, and people die.
And it's also got some very funny.
Mice die.
Well, that's like a Bluth animation, right? Like the guy that left Disney. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking back again over all three parts of your life now that we've talked about, do you see any common threads about what kind of horror that you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
I think I kind of like it all, but I've always had a real soft spot for. So my favorite horror film is probably Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I've always had like a soft spot for kind of like not hillbilly, but like sort of family out in the middle of nowhere and like a kind of family of demented rednecks or hillbillies attack them. I love that kind of backwoods kind of horror. So like that and Hills Have Eyes and stuff like that. It's kind of not a super like there's not really that many films in that subgenre, but yeah, I do really enjoy those films. I find them quite disturbing.
Deliverance?
Yeah.
Deliverance, yeah, definitely one of those.
That's kind of on the same page, but yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. That's kind of the same favorite genre I have, if there were any, is the psycho misfit murderer family.
Yeah, it's just there's something very, I don't know, it really appeals to me. Yeah, Chainsaw had that. Actually, that's one I kind of forgot about. That had quite a big impact on me as a teenager, seeing that.
And what was it that you enjoyed about those?
I think the first Chainsaw really impressed me because it's not a particularly gruesome movie, and it kind of like doesn't show a lot of stuff, but again, it's kind of like imagination filling in the blanks. But it has a real sense of like it kind of sets you up. Like it starts a little bit slow. It's like it just has this unsettling feeling at the beginning.
It's very unnerving. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very unnerving. And then the first time you see Leatherface is just one of the most terrifying and like out of nowhere kind of shocking moments in like horror history, I think. So it's just it's like this film that's kind of unsettling the whole way through, but then is like sort of punctuated by these like absolutely fucking terrifying moments. It's a really good blend of like flat out shock kind of horror and then also just that uncomfortable kind of feeling throughout it as well. Yeah, that's a great film.
A lot of screaming.
Well, that too. Is there something that you find that you particularly enjoy about this? Like I had asked about the common threads, and you said, the common thread might be people stuck in the middle of nowhere and they're set upon. Is there something you like about that scenario?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's a very scary scenario, and it's something you can definitely relate to as well. I think like those kind of films, even though they're ridiculous, like in a way, but they also are connected to a kind of grimy sort of reality as well. So I think that makes them kind of the idea of being stuck in the middle of nowhere is already scary, and then you're throwing in a bunch of terrifying rednecks into the mix just to make it even worse. Yeah.
or in some cases, a single terrifying redneck. Like one of my all-time favorite films is both Wolf Creeks, really, and that's kind of along the same lines. You have crazy psycho redneck murderer out in the middle of nowhere, and out in the middle of nowhere too. So you've got kind of both things going there.
Yeah, the first Wolf Creek, very disturbing film. Yeah.
So what I'm about to say isn't typically considered horror, but kind of fits into this. How do you feel about Mad Max?
I think I'm in the minority that my favorite is the first one. I really love that first film because it's sort of like society's like crumbling at that point. It's not completely gone to shit, and I think that's kind of like it's kind of something kind of more effective about that for me. But yeah, I love all those films except the third one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the first one the best. So we're kind of down here to really the last question, which is, we've talked about a lot of things here that that you like about the horror genre, particularly having open-ended questions and things that really stop and you have to stop and think about, and you will continue thinking about for a long time. So the last question, though, is then why horror? Because you could have that kind of same feeling in any number of genres. It could be historical drama or sci-fi, or I don't even know what else. But is there something that particularly you find horror brings to the table?
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on it a little bit. I mean, these days I'm not quite. I don't think I seek out horror as much as I used to, and I just enjoy like all genres. But I think when I was younger, it was part of it was like the feeling that you're watching something that you shouldn't be watching, like that you're like kind of not allowed to watch. But I think that was sort of part of it that made it appealing, like kind of feeling like I was breaking the rules by watching it. I think that's part of it, and I think also, I think the more I watched her, I got a real appreciation for the like kind of the artistry that goes into the effects as well.
It is quite
so
an
I think
art form.
I think that's really part of it, and yeah, I think just visually, horror really appeals to me. Like I think I said it before, but it's like it feels like to me like often the most like pure cinema kind of genre where it's just you can really push things really to the extreme. So yeah, I think all of those things are what initially made it appeal to me. And plus, like, horror has like a community around it as well. Like I don't think any other than like maybe sci-fi, it's not like there's a community around like rom-coms, for example,
you don't hear about too many rom-com conventions.
Yeah, so I think like horror, maybe more than any other genre, really creates this community where people come together and like want to suggest other things and want to dig into like more obscure stuff and independent stuff. So I think that's kind of part of it as well, that kind of sort of like sort of keeps you involved in the genre and wanting to seek out more.
It's more diverse.
Cool. So I think if we were to sum up the conversation, then some of the things that you just mentioned now about the taboo, you did mention the pure emotional reaction before, and sort of the roller coaster effect that gives you. And as we said a few minutes ago about the the unanswered questions, to me that sounds like that would be the heart of the answer. If we ask the question, what is it about horror that you enjoy? That's the answer. Is there something else that you think of that we've left out that we haven't touched on?
No, I think that's pretty much it. And I think it's also, it ties into the taboo, like just seeing things that you're just like, wow, like this came out of someone's brain. There's kind of like Cats is kind of like that as well, right? I think any kind of weird cinema, it's enjoyable to watch and go like, wow, someone actually thought of this.
Yeah, I've watched some films before where it's like, I don't know what's more disturbing, the fact that, or like, I don't know which would be more disturbing, if this were based off of true facts and that actually happened, or someone thought of this and put pen to paper? Like,
yeah.
Well, whether it's
Definitely.
real or not, the fact is somebody thought about it.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for your evening, or actually, it's your morning. It's our evening.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
We had mentioned, I think that at the end here, we would also give you an opportunity to talk about. I'm trying to remember what it was that you. Oh, that's right. You said you didn't have anything to talk about.
I could plug someone else's film. Can I do that?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. I recommend, if you're actually, Chris, definitely, I think you might have already seen this, but there's a film by a person called Guy Pearce. He actually lives in Osaka as well. He's like a kind of makes, like, it's hard to say it is just horror, but like very, very disturbing film. He made a short film called Difficulty Breathing, and I highly recommend trying to track it down. But yeah, his name's Guy Pearce. You can find him on Twitter. He's also got a shop as well.
Like Guy Pearce, the actor, like from Prometheus.
It's spelt. Is it spelt the same? Wait, let me check. How do you spell Guy Pearce's name? Yeah, it's actually spelt the same. Oh my gosh, there you go. Huh. But no, it's not. It's not that Guy Pearce though. He's a British guy. But yeah, so it's just an incredibly low budget film, but it's one of like the most like effective, like not horror, but just effective, like disturbing films I've seen in ages. And he does some like really interesting stuff with camera and sound, and yeah, I think it's it's pretty underseen, so I really think people should seek it out.
Cool.
It's and what is it called again?
Difficulty Breathing.
I'll tell you what, if you have any links that specifically go to this guy or his work, send us the links, because when we put together a bio page or a bio for you on the Horror Makes Us Happy website, we can include the link there, and that way anyone listening can go to the website and then jump from there.
Cool. Yeah, I'll try, and I think he's pretty sure he has a web shop, so I'll find that.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, and thank you to anyone out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakeushappy.com. We'll have a schedule posted there to show who we're interviewing next, as well as a list of the people we'd like to interview. If you and you as well, Dave, if anybody can help us link up with some more of these people, or if you know somebody else that you'd like to have added to the list, let us know. You can become a Patreon supporter and link to our social media there as well. In general, just let us know how we're doing. HorrorMakesUsHappy.com.
Yeah.